Hey there, welcome back to Pepper Geek. In today's video, I'll be talking about a few common problems that you may face when your pepper plants are growing indoors. So we start all of our pepper plants from seed indoors, and they'll live inside for at least 6 to 8 weeks before they're ready to go outside. And we face a lot of issues growing indoors. Most important, of course, is lighting. As you can see behind me, we have grow lights for that. But there are a few other things that you want to do for your plants to get them ready for the transition outdoors. And if conditions aren't right, you may run into issues, one of the most common of which is mold and fungus growth on the soil surface. So today we're going to dive into that topic a little bit, talk about why it happens, how you can prevent it, and whether or not it's really even a big deal to worry about. But first, check out our new ebook, Growing Perfect Peppers. It's all about how to grow peppers from seed to harvest. It's full of beautiful pepper pictures and useful information for growing, so check it out in the link in the description. Okay, so let's talk mold and fungus. So this is a really common problem. We get it all the time when we're growing our plants indoors, when we're waiting for our seeds to germinate sometimes. You get a little bit of white fuzzy mold on the surface of the soil, maybe even some green algae growth or some fungus. It's very unsightly and it can make you worry about your plants. Are they healthy? Is this bad for them? What can I do to fix it? So first of all, usually these things are not really anything to be too concerned about. Unless it gets completely out of hand and it goes very deep and you don't do anything to fix the problem, it's probably not going to harm your plants. But they're not exactly good either, so what can you do to prevent them in the first place, or what can you do if you have a problem? Well, for one, watering less often. Molds tend to start growing on the surface of the soil, so when your plants are young and they're still small, it's a really good idea to bottom water, which is when you take your seed trays and place them into a container like this one, put some water into the bottom of the container, and then allow that water to be absorbed into the seed cells, thereby watering from the bottom rather than the top. And as you practice this, you'll get used to how long it takes for it to soak up the water, and what you're going for is feeling some weight in the seed cells, but the surface can still be left dry or even just a little bit wet. You'll start to see that darkening on the surface, and then you know you can take it out of the water. And then of course, only watering when it's actually necessary. You definitely want to let at least the first centimeter or so, maybe even an inch of the soil to dry out before you water again. And that's going to depend on your specific environment, you know, how much airflow you're providing, how dry your air is, and all of those other factors. And that leads me to another point, which is aeration. We use a small fan that just blows air into our growing space and provides some airflow, some circulation. That's going to prevent those mold spores from landing, and it will also help dry out the surface layer of soil more quickly, preventing those molds from really taking hold. Even just turning on an oscillating fan for a few hours each day can really help. And there are some other great benefits to providing aeration, including strengthening the stems of the young plants and also reducing the chances of edema. But what about before your seedlings are even sprouted? When you're germinating, you need to keep the surface of the soil moist. How can you help reduce that mold growth in that period? Well, we have a couple of tricks. Number one is using cinnamon. Cinnamon is a natural fungicide, and it is known to reduce fungal growth and inhibit it. So you can sprinkle just a light layer of cinnamon on the surface of the soil after you plant, and that will really help reduce that white mold from taking hold and growing. This can also be used as a measure after you see it, so if you're seeing white mold and you don't like the look of it, sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on it. And it smells nice. And another tip for germination is to use a seed starter mix. There are many great reasons to use seed starter mix for germinating your seeds. It's light and fluffy, it's the perfect growing medium for young, early root systems, but it also doesn't contain nutrients, and nutrients can really add to the problem of mold and algae growth. So we actually had a perfect example of this year. We started many of our seedlings in plain seed starter mix, but we decided to add some slow release fertilizer to that same mix and started some seedlings that way, and just a few days afterwards we had white mold on the surface. It was a clear correlation with the slow release fertilizer, so that's just something to keep in mind. And one more thing I want to talk about on the subject of early indoor problems is damping off disease. We've never personally had damping off disease on our plants, but that's likely because it's more common in cool and damp conditions. So think around 65 degrees Fahrenheit and moist. Damping off can be caused by a number of different pathogens, many of them molds and fungi, so avoiding those really cool and damp conditions are going to help lessen the chances of that happening. But essentially what does happen if your plants come down with damping off disease is that they will slump over. You'll usually see a little brown mark on the base or near the base of the stem, and they'll fall over and die. And when you have damping off disease, you basically have to just start over from scratch. So all of the tips we've talked about are going to help reduce the possibility of damping off, but also remember to try to keep the temperatures in the 70 to 75 range. And lastly, I thought we would talk about fungus gnats, since they're sort of tangentially related and it's a really common issue that people face indoors. And we happen to be dealing with a fungus gnat issue right now, so I want to lay to rest some of the common misconceptions surrounding fungus gnats and what you can do to help treat a problem. So first, you should understand the life cycle of the fungus gnat. Basically, a gnat is born, it matures, it burrows into the soil and lays its eggs where the larvae are produced, and then they hatch and the cycle continues. But unfortunately, there's not really any one product that's going to solve both issues. You sort of have to think of the flies and the larvae as two separate problems. So one of the things you'll find on the internet if you go searching for how do I deal with fungus gnats is make these little traps. Use some wine and some dish soap, maybe a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and the flies will fly into it and they'll drown. Well, that doesn't work for fungus gnats. That type of trap works really well for fruit flies, but if you actually have a fungus gnat issue, that's not going to do anything. So I guess step one really should be truly identifying that you actually have a fungus gnat problem and not fruit flies. So you've identified them as fungus gnats. What do? Well, for the flies themselves, we recommend using these yellow sticky traps. Here's a good example of one here. You can see there's a bunch of flies on this one here. The flies are sort of attracted to this color, and when they land on the surface, they get stuck and they can't get off. So those have been working really well. We have them sort of mixed around here and we're catching lots of flies. So that really helps interrupt that reproductive cycle. But what about the larvae below the surface of the soil? Well, number one, let's come back to watering first. Water less often. Fungus gnats are looking for damp soil to lay their eggs. If you allow the first inch or so of your soil to dry out between waterings, it's much less likely that the flies are going to have a good place to lay their eggs, and therefore you're going to end up with less fungus gnats. But if that doesn't work and you have a really bad problem, there are some products you can use to decrease the population, and that is essentially mosquito dunks or mosquito bits, if you can find them, which kills the larvae, and basically you just sprinkle them over the surface of the soil and then water over them, and the toxin goes into the soil and kills the larvae. So fungus gnats are no fun. We're having to deal with them ourselves right now, but there are things you can do, and simply by watering less often, I feel like we say that in every video, but watering less often can really solve a lot of your problems with growing peppers. Don't forget to check out our ebook, Growing Perfect Peppers. The first link in the description will take you over to the page where you can learn more about it and see some of the pictures and pages. We're really excited about the book. It's just the perfect guide for a new gardener or anyone who wants to take their pepper growing to the next level. And just a quick shout out to some of our new patrons. Thank you so much for joining us on Patreon. Thank you to Will S., Scott M., Nicole M., Intuitive Aqua, Keltoid 5, Nikki G, Aaron N, Navi R, Bradley HS, Cyprian, Casey, Johannes, Stephen B, and Nicholas M. Thank you guys so much for joining our Patreon. We're having a lot of fun on Patreon, and we couldn't do it without you, so thank you. So that's all for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Let us know in the comments below what you do to deal with any of the issues we talked about today, and we'll see you in the next video.